Welcome back to WordCamp Santa Clarita 2021. We're here in the Sky Tower track, highlighting important accessibility topics. My name is Megan, and it's my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, the talented and generous Michelle Frechette. Michelle is the Director of Customer Success at GiveWP, the premier WordPress donations plugin. She is also the podcast barista at WPCoffeeTalk.com, co-founder of underrepresentedintech.com, creator of WPCareerPages.com, board member and volunteer at Big Orange Heart, and many, many other things, as well as speaker at many WordPress events. So her talk is Accessibility is More Than Disability Accommodation. Let's get started.
Hi, I'm Michelle Frischette, Director of Customer Success at GiveWP, podcast barista, WPCoffeeTalk.com, creator of WPCareerPages.com, where I also tweet out every Wednesday job opportunities in the WordPress community for anybody looking for jobs, board member and volunteer for Big Orange Heart. I'm an author, a coach, I do a whole bunch of stuff in the WordPress community, and I'm the co-founder of underrepresentedintech.com. And what I want to talk to you about today has a lot to do with what we do at underrepresentedintech.com. Today's topic is accessibility is more than disability accommodation. In WordPress and in web design in general, we tend to think about accessibility as what we can do on our websites to make them accessible for more people. And that is absolutely the right thing to do. We want to make sure that our websites are not only accessible to people with visual impairments, but also people with hearing impairments, people with motor skill issues, people who are neurodivergent, all of those different things. We want to make sure that our websites are navigable through keyboards, and we want to make sure that colors work right so that contrast works correctly for people with visual issues, and that also screen readers can work properly on your site. All of those are incredibly important, not only for site visitors, but also for anybody wanting to work in WordPress or work in web so that they can actually use the tools on the dashboard to be able to build that too. All of that is 100% important work, and all of that is 100% necessary. What I want to talk to you about today, though, isn't necessarily what's going on every website for accessibility, but I want to talk about the fact that WordPress and our community needs to be more accessible to underrepresented groups. Underrepresentedintech.com is not a moneymaker. We don't make money on it. We're not a 501c3 yet, although we're thinking about it. But it's an organization, it's a website for people in underserved and underrepresented communities to be able to create profiles. And then people who have job openings, podcasts, other opportunities, speaking engagements, events, things like that, can search the database for people who are specialists in things that they'd like to have either in their organization or in their event, who are also part of those underrepresented groups, to increase the diversity with good, solid, well-qualified people at their event so that it doesn't become a homogeneous event of all, well, it's tech, so should I say all white guys leading the pack and leading the talks and expecting the rest of us to follow what they're saying. And it's not that the white guys don't have a lot of good things to say, but you want to have events, you want to have organizations, you want to have projects that are more rich and more diverse, incorporate more people, and just work better for everybody. If you want to have, let's say you're a business and you want to sell something on your website, you are much more likely to sell it to a broader audience if the people who are driving the decisions and giving inputs for decisions are also a diverse group. If everybody sitting at the table is of one community and not a more diverse community and incorporating underrepresented folks, then you're less likely to appeal to that wider audience and that more diverse audience. And as far as marketing goes, as far as sales goes, as far as product design, you really want to make sure that everything that you're doing has inputs from different communities. For example, once upon a time, everything that women purchased for themselves, I'm talking, back in the Mad Men type era, everything was designed and created by men for women. So it wasn't necessarily something that was comfortable to wear. It wasn't necessarily something that was easy to use. And it wasn't necessarily something that women appreciated being able to use. So, think about the fact that for years, vacuum cleaners were being sold to men to give as gifts to women. We don't want vacuum cleaners for our Christmas or our birthday presents. We want things that we enjoy. And so the idea behind having more people at the table is that you'll get women's inputs on women's brands. You'll get, underserved populations, from different Indigenous people, from the Black communities, from Hispanic communities, from the Asian cultures, and the appeal to a broader audience, so that you can actually do better in your business and do better in your project and have better events going forward. People in the BIPOC community, LGBTQ community, the neurodivergent group, older communities like myself, we still find it difficult to have a seat at the table. It almost feels like when our parents used to tell us that they had to walk to school uphill both ways in the snow, which of course isn't possible to have it be uphill both directions, but sometimes that's how it feels. When we talk about having a seat at the table, what do we mean? Well, a seat at the table means having a place where we can give inputs to the decision makers, even if we aren't the final decision makers ourselves. We have inputs into how things are created. We have inputs to how things are marketed. We have inputs to how the strategy behind events goes, and how the overall events happen as well. If you make room at the table for people from underserved and underrepresented groups, you're much more likely to have a rich, diverse event, community, opportunities, sales, all of that goes together, because you are including rich, diverse experiences and backgrounds in the people that you have included before sales, before events, and before any project has been turned over to the public. So let's talk about events first. We're at an event. This is WordCamp. WordCamps, other events, whether they're summits, whether they're WordCamps, whether they're just other conferences, actually do better if you have a diverse group of speakers. Diversity in the speakers means that people who are attending can see themselves in the people who are going to be speaking to them. I'm much more likely to attend an event if I see there's other women speakers as well. I'm much more likely to attend an event if I see that disability has been accommodated. Much more likely to attend an event if I see that there's other underserved populations. There's much more likelihood of ethnic minorities attending events if other ethnic minorities have been included and are able to present their knowledge and their expertise to the entire group. But having diverse speakers doesn't just happen. It starts at the top. If you are building a group of people to organize an event, make sure that you have organizers that are also parts of underserved and underrepresented groups. You're much more likely to reach into those populations of people for speakers and for volunteers if your community of organizers is also part of those underrepresented groups. I'm much more likely to pull other women in if I'm part of the organizing team, for example. I'm much more likely to get people who are my age group if I'm part of the team. And I'm much more likely to think about other underrepresented groups like people with disabilities if I'm also part of the team. Oftentimes, I will attend an event that is not necessarily created for people with mobility impairments. I have attended meetings in the past or attended conferences in the past where I was told that all the rooms are close together, it's all in the same building, it should be no problem for you to walk from location to location, from session to session, only to get to those events and find out lunch is practically a quarter mile away or more. And for me, walking with a cane is next to impossible to do. So I'm automatically left out of lunch. Somebody usually has to bring my lunch to me and wherever I'm at, so that I'm not putting myself in physical pain just to attend different things. Well, then you've already excluded me from what's the most rich part of a lot of conferences, which is sitting down at the table together to have a meal. I don't get that networking opportunity. And thinking about things like that is super important. If you have somebody on your team with mobility issues, then you understand, then you have somebody who can advocate for others in that same situation. Having somebody, it's not just enough, for example, to know that there are elevators and that there are curb cuts for wheelchairs. It's also important to know that somebody with a cane, somebody who tires easily, somebody with oxygen issues, who still walks or walks with a cane or a walker, can still physically get to those locations, not just because it's a smooth path, but because it's not so far that they have difficulty actually arriving at their location. And then at the end of that meal, having to turn around and go back. So having somebody in all of those different kinds of underserved, underrepresented groups will help you think about how to interact with people in those groups and make sure that everybody's needs are accommodated for. So it starts at the top, making sure you have organizers that can reach out to people, include people for truly inclusive and rich environment, rich enactment, rich interactions, but a very, very interactive and enrichment opportunity for your event. When you start to think about inviting speakers and inviting people to apply to be speakers at your event, it's also really important to think about how you do that. Look at your form on your site. Does it actually appeal to everybody? Is the picture at the top of the page a homogeneous group, or is it a rich, diverse group of people at the top? Does it invite me to know that I'm somebody who would be welcome to apply, or does it make me feel like maybe I shouldn't belong at that? A few years back, there was a conference that had all male speakers, and they came under a lot of scrutiny because there wasn't a single woman in technology invited to speak at that conference. They came under such harsh scrutiny that they started to backpedal and look for at least one woman to be a speaker at the organization. Not a single woman was interested in being tokenized that way. And because so many people were so opposed to not being inclusive that way, some of the men on the panel also started, or some of the male speakers also started to say, maybe this isn't the right venue for me, and started to drop off. And eventually that conference was canceled that year because they hadn't thought about the fact that there's more to the entire community than the people who were sitting at the table organizing it. If they had had women on the planning committee, if they had had people of color on the planning committee, if they had included the LGBT community, if they had thought outside of their small group of homogeneous people, they would have had a better opportunity to invite other people to speak. The first thing they said was, well, anybody could apply to speak. And yes, that's true. But when anybody looked at the site and looked at the speakers in the past and saw that it was all men and only men, or very few women at the table, then they decided that probably that wasn't the right place to apply to. It has to be something where you 100% make that application, make that website, make it appealing so that people know that their application is welcome. Further than that, though, it isn't enough to just build it and they will come. You actually have to do outreach. It's not enough to just tweet it. It's not just enough to post it on LinkedIn and Facebook. You can't just say, hey, speaker applications are open, come apply. You actually have to do your work. You have to reach out to people in different communities. You have to reach out to different people who know people who can invite others to apply. You can use a tool like underrepresentedintech.com. You can go to that. You can search for people who are interested in speaking at events who fit your needs. So they're developers. If it's a developer conference, you can look for people who are developers. We know that everybody in the database is in an underrepresented group. So you search for people who are developers in that group who are interested in speaking at a conference, and you'll get a list of people that you could reach out to invite. And the same is true for any kind of talent in there. So somebody who's WordPress, somebody who's marketing, there's lots of different things that you can look at. And of course, the tool that we've created isn't the only tool that you can use. You can reach out to girls who code. You can reach out to Black girl coders. There's different kinds of groups. There are different nonprofits. There are different organizations that have lots of opportunities to get in front of people who you might want in your group. So reach out to those different organizations. Make sure they know that everybody is invited to apply. Maybe you'll get some of the people at the top of their organization, but certainly they could share the opportunity out through their organization that you're looking for people to speak, and you're looking for a variety of topics, and you're looking for people who are experts in the field, and you're casting a wide net to be able to find those people. Absolutely look for the people who you want, invite them to come in. That is how you actually reach underserved, underrepresented communities. As a woman, so many times I have thought about applying to something. I have thought about throwing my hat in the ring for speaking or for podcasts, things like that. I'm talking maybe 5-10 years ago even, where I didn't know that my application would be welcome. And sometimes that imposter syndrome does creep in, right? So there's a lot of people who worry that what they have to offer isn't good enough, or they're not expert enough, or that somebody will think that they don't belong where they are. You have to, as the organizers of the event, make sure that people know that their expertise is wanted and that their applications are absolutely wanted. Does that mean you guarantee them a place to speak? Of course not. You want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to apply, and then you absolutely need to pick the people that have the best topics, for example, and the best written examples of what their topics are to speak at your conference. But reaching out to those people, tapping them on the shoulder, asking them to apply, that is how you get a rich and diverse group of speakers. I'm a podcast host. I work very hard to make sure that when you look at the list of guests I've had, that it isn't all a homogeneous group. Not only is it not all men, not only is it all white, not all white people, not only is it not all US people, but there's a nice diversity of backgrounds as well. So some of the people who have been on my podcast are marketers. Some of the people who have been on my podcast are developers or web designers, web builders. I've had people who just built their website for themselves, and they're not even in the industry as much as they use WordPress to further their career. I had one man whose job title is a troubadour. He is a singer. He has his own website. He uses WordPress to raise money and to fund his career as somebody who creates music. So I have a very diverse group of people who have been part of the WP Coffee Talk podcast. I have made sure that I invite people from different communities. I have had people in over 24 different countries on 6 continents be on my podcast, because I want people who have all different aspects of experience, whether they are brand new to WordPress or whether they were the founder of WordPress himself. I have everybody in between. And, every age, every ethnicity. I've had people from all different communities as guests on the podcast, because it's very important to me, not only to practice what I preach, but to have that diversity, to have that rich background, and to hear the great stories and experiences of people from all over the world, from different cultures, from different genders, and from the opportunities that they've created to have the opportunity to speak and for their stories to be told through my podcast. If you're a podcaster, look at the list of people you've had on your show as guests. Do you see a pattern? Is it homogeneous? Do you need to create better opportunities for people to apply to be on your podcast? First, do you have a way for people to apply to be on it? If you regularly have guests, is there a way for them to fill out a form on your site saying, I'm interested in being a guest on your show? That's first and foremost. Make it easy for people to find that for you. But as I said, it's not enough to just have that form. You have to go and search. You have to ask people. You have to use tools like Twitter and Facebook groups and other different groups. Maybe you're looking at, I can't even think of all the different apps that you can use now, Instagram and things like that. Use hashtags. look at conversations, ask other people. That's how underrepresented in tech got started. For example, people would constantly come to me and say, do you know anybody who would be good to speak on this podcast? Do you know anybody who'd be good for this job? Because they were looking for people that were more diverse and were from different backgrounds. And they know that that's something that I talk to people all the time. And so that's how we got started, is we wanted to create a tool that, instead of having to come to me all the time and just my limited number of people that I know, open it up to very many more people so that other people have an opportunity for this as well. So as a podcast host, as a podcast owner, make sure that you are looking through different tools, make sure you are reaching out to different organizations, and make sure that you are looking for opportunities beyond the people that you might think. Not always the well-known names, for example. There are so many wonderful people with great experiences and lots of expertise beyond the same 10 people that we might often think of when we think of people in SEO or people in UX or UI and those different things. We want to make sure that we're actually including just lots and lots of different opportunities for people. So make sure that your form is inclusive, but also make sure that you're doing the proper outreach. Outreach is definitely a theme throughout this talk today. If you are looking to hire somebody in your company, in your organization, there's a lot of things that need to be looked at. Absolutely start at the beginning. Let's look at your application. Let's look at the career page that you have on your website. How are you describing the position? Are you using words that are inclusive words? When you are hoping to get people from all different populations, underserved, underrepresented, or not, you need to make sure that language isn't off-putting. I know that's a little bit strange to think about, but I once helped somebody with a website where their language right before the application said, if you think you might be qualified for this position. Now, think about the fact that there's a lot of people with imposter syndrome, but there's a lot of good people who might, even though they're kind of doubting maybe a little here or there, might be amazing for your company. And they see words like if, think, and might. If you think you might be qualified for this position, then fill out the application below. Why put that on there at all? Once they've read through the entire description, why not say the next step is apply below? Encourage those. The worst thing that can happen is you get applications that aren't qualified and you just push them to the side. Thank you, but you're not a good fit for this role. But what you really want is lots of applications so you can find the right person. So take out language that makes people self-doubt. Just go right to it. Encourage every application that you can. Then look at your application itself. What kinds of things are you requiring in your application? Are you requiring a date of birth? Well, some people who might not want you to know how old they are might not want to put their date of birth in there. Are you requiring a photo? Maybe I'm worried that you're going to look at me as a plus size woman and think, oh, I don't want her on my team. She's not pretty, or she's too short, or she walks with a cane. That's probably not good. And I know it sounds silly to say those things, but people with disabilities, people who are overweight, people who have those self-doubts, they don't want to put a photo in your application. They don't want to be judged by what they look like. They want to be judged by their resume and their experience of work and their expertise. So think about what you're actually requiring in that application. Do you need a date of birth to hire somebody? Yes, of course you do. But you don't need that at the application stage. That's absolutely stuff that you can implement in hiring paperwork. If you need a photo for the website, you can get a headshot after you've qualified them for the job, after you've hired them. Don't think you have to get everything up front, because you will have people self-select out of the process because of self-doubts. So make sure that your application itself is 100% encouraging to them. If they can upload their resume, even better, because you know how easy it is to upload a resume. We've all put resumes together, and then to have to turn around at a website and fill out all of the same information that's in the resume that you've already attached is just It just feels like grunt work. Nobody wants to do that. So make sure it's nice and easy for people to apply and also very inclusive. From the website to right through the interview and the hiring paperwork, make sure that you're always welcoming and encouraging for people to apply. So whether it's the website, it's the email that you reply to, the your automatic email as soon as somebody's submitted that application, make sure that that is super nice, that the words that you use, any images that you might put in that email, that everything is encouraging the person to the next step. So even if it's an automatic reply saying, we've received your application, we will review it later, and we will be in touch if you're a good fit for us. Make sure it's something that makes people want to go to the next step if they're selected, so that it's not too curt, it's not too sterile, and that it doesn't have to be, hey, let's have tea, but you definitely want to make sure that you're using language that encourages people and makes them feel like, hey, this is a company that I'd want that interview for. And then when you do have the interview with that person, make sure that you are constantly encouraging. Eye contact is super important, especially for somebody with a disability, somebody who is on the plus size of things. People like looking me in the eye is super important. Men tend to look men in the eyes. Men tend to not want to look at women because they feel like it's off-putting to us. But I'll tell you something for sure. Looking somebody in the eyes is certainly something that's inviting and doesn't make me feel like you don't want to know who I am. Make sure you're having that eye contact, even if it's in Zoom. Look at your camera. Make sure that it feels like that person is being valued and trusted throughout the interview process. When to do interviews, that is another question. So if you only do interviews in your 9 to 5, you are probably missing out on opportunities to interview people who are either outside of your time zone, but also people who have a full-time job and who are looking to get into a better position for themselves. If you are only interviewing people during the day and they can't take time away from their current job to interview with you, then they've missed out on an opportunity, but you've missed out on an opportunity to have somebody who might be the perfect fit for your company. If you can accommodate people outside of those hours, then that's a really, really amazing thing to do. I think about when I was a young mother and I was a single mother. And so my opportunities to leave work to interview for a job that might be better for me and my daughter, that was not a good opportunity if I had to leave work to do it. If somebody could fit me in at the end of their day or first thing in the morning and then I could go to work, it was a much better opportunity for me because I didn't have to miss work to do it. I didn't have to worry about whether or not I was going to be docked pay. I didn't have to take vacation time or sick time to do it. It felt better because I was above board with what was going on, and I had better opportunities. So if you can accommodate people outside of their workday, whether it's on their lunch hour, before work, or a little bit after work, you also are opening up opportunities for people. And it's especially important when you're looking at global remote positions, because people are definitely not always going to be inside your time zone. And so having some flexibility to do those interviews is really important. At the very least, include an equal opportunity employment statement on your website. Have terms and conditions on your website that talk about how you are non-discriminatory and how everybody has an equal opportunity to apply for your positions. Mean it. Don't just put it on there. Put it on there and mean it. Give people the opportunity to know that your intention is good and that you're making every effort to have a rich, diverse community within your organization. Something I did want to talk about too is what we call Equal Pay Day. Equal Pay Day every year is the day into the following year that a woman has to work before she's equaled the salary of a man in the same position or similar position in the year before. So for example, a woman who is, let's say, a developer at your company and a man who's a developer at your company, ideally, if they have the same experience and they've worked there the same amount of time, should be making the same salary. Traditionally, that's not true. Traditionally, let's say a man has earned $75,000 in 2020. A woman would have to work this year till March 24th to actually hit that $75,000 pay mark. And so it's not fair that women and minorities especially have to work longer and are automatically docked because of who they are and given less salary. And sometimes that's because we don't know enough to advocate and we don't know how far we can push. We're so worried about not getting the job that we cave on salary negotiation. It's much better if you as a company can appreciate people across the board in the same way for the same job. Not only do women have to work until March 24th, had to work until March 24th this year for that equal pay day, it's even worse when you look at women across minorities. So for Asian American and Pacific Islander women, that date was actually earlier. It was March 9th. Black women in the United States have to work until August 3rd to make the same salary as a man did in the prior year. And Native and Indigenous women have to work till September 8th, and Latinas, October 21st. So a Latina woman has to work almost 2 full years to equal the salary of a man in the same role. That's why it's hard to recruit women. That's why it's hard to recruit minorities, because we need to value people. That's what it comes down to at the base of it all, is valuing people makes accessibility for people. The more you can value people, the greater opportunity you have to have that rich environment, to have people of underserved populations working in your company, working for your podcast, volunteering for your organization, putting on your conferences, speaking at your conferences, etc. It's about intention. It absolutely is about your intent to create a better organization, to create a better event, to create a better podcast, to create a better project. It's not about your intent to appear diverse. It's not about making it look like, hey, we're great. Look, we have a woman on our staff. It's about having the intention of creating a better environment and creating better products and creating better services, because you are taking into account the diversity of the experiences and the expertise of the people who you are inviting to join you in those endeavors. Privilege exists. White privilege exists. Male privilege exists. And it's sometimes hard to know where that is and what that is. So it takes research. You have to do work to know that you are creating the right environment, checking your privilege at the door, so to speak, so that you are inviting people in, you're warm, welcoming, and inclusive to people, and not having that, lording your privilege over them. For a man to know that he makes that much money in a year and that a woman has to work that much further into the next year. Once you know that, you have privilege and you should do something about it. It's your responsibility to do something about it, to level the playing field for people. Make sure that those people have same opportunities. That man may be feeding a family of 4. That woman may be a single mother feeding a family of 4 too. So why should she make less money than a man does in the same position? It's about those opportunities. Earlier this year, a white man was offered the opportunity to host a podcast and to be paid to host that podcast. And that was great. And he is really good at what he does. And he's a great candidate. He's awesome. I have no problem with the fact that he was hired. The question, though, arose, were other people considered for that position as well? And there was a conversation on Twitter about it. Literal conversation. Somebody said, well, anybody can make a podcast. If you want to host a podcast, just make one. And somebody said, well, there's barriers to entry for that. And the response was, well, you can do a podcast for free. But the truth of the matter is you can't just do a podcast for free, because time means something. Time is valuable. Time is a commodity. And when I was a single mom trying to raise my daughter, go to school, and work a full-time job, the thought of having to do something extra like that, would I have loved to? I mean, podcast didn't exist back then, but if they had, wouldn't I have loved to have had a podcast? Absolutely. Would there have been any opportunity for me to have done that? No. If somebody had said, I want to hire you and pay you to do a podcast, then yes, because that would have served a value for my life and my daughter's life. Instead of me just being, away from her a couple more hours a week, I could have been providing for her through the money that would have come in through that couple more hours a week. And let's face it, it's more than a couple hours a week to do a podcast. But bear with me through this. If as a single woman, I had been offered opportunities to do things that paid me to do them, it would have changed my life. It would have changed my life because I would have not just been volunteering and putting in time like that to try to get experiences, but I would have been valued in a much different way. It would have changed my life, and it would have changed my daughter's life, because I would have been able to provide things for her that I wasn't able to as a single mother at the time. If you think about the fact that there are those barriers to entry. Think about a woman who might have 3 kids at home. She's a single mom. She's working a full-time job. Would she like to make extra money doing something like that? Absolutely. Is she going to start her own podcast and have to, maybe you could do it for free, but at the very least, you should get a microphone. You should buy some services to make sure that it works, that it's a good podcast. And it's not just enough to record a podcast and push it out to the world. You have to do marketing. You have to have other people. You don't have to have other people helping you, but it helps to have other people helping you. But you absolutely need to put time and effort into making it happen. If you're hired to do a podcast, you have other people who are doing a lot of that work. Maybe you're recording it and somebody else is transcribing it, and somebody else is editing it, and somebody else is doing the marketing and putting it out on social media. All of those things come together that would help that person's life and move it forward. Now, that's not to say you don't, at the end of the day, look at all of the qualified candidates and still think that the person that you hired is the best person. That's great. But did you give other people opportunity? That is the question. So when you are thinking about what barriers there are to entry for things, always think about what it might take for that single mom, for a neurodivergent person who might need some help figuring out how to write their bio. Maybe you're thinking, maybe you could think about whether if somebody's coming in for a physical interview, are there stairs? Is this person in a wheelchair? There have been lots of opportunities where I have decided not to attend something because there was too much walking. And for me, that was a barrier to entry. There are so many opportunities. If you think about all the people that you want to have included, and then you think about what those barriers to entry are, you can reduce those barriers to entry or blow them right away, and then make it possible for other people to attend and have a much better experience. I hope your takeaway today, and the point that I think I've driven home more than enough, is that intention is everything. You absolutely have to focus on diversity. You have to focus on inclusion, and you have to focus on accessibility in order to truly make your events, your projects, your podcasts, your blogs, and your companies accessible to everyone. Because as I've said more than enough, the more diversity you have in your organization, in your projects, in your events, the more diversity there is, the more richness there is, the experiences that are there, and the better off it is for everybody involved. Thank you so much for sticking in there and listening. I really appreciate you all. Follow me on Twitter, DM me on Twitter. My DMs are always open. I'm happy to serve as a resource. I'm at Michelle Ames on Twitter. And certainly you can visit us at underrepresentedintech.com to pick our brains, to ask questions, or to be included in the database. We truly, really want WordPress to be as inclusive and as accessible as possible. And we know that you can be part of the solution. Thank you.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you so much for that great session.
Well, thank you. It was great to be able to present.
Yeah, I love that you highlight and uplift people in our community that are underserved and underrepresented. You just seem to be doing that everywhere you go, and I really appreciate it.
Well, I like how I've been able to be included in so many things. And so, whenever you have been given a hand up, it's your responsibility to turn around and help people behind you along the way as well. So I hope that I do that well.
Yes, your message was really resonating with the chat. And I wanted to give a shout out to a comment from Sally, who said, "This talk is very empowering to ignore those negative voices." I thought that really captured the feeling that the session was giving.
Absolutely. We all have self-doubts, right? And those negative voices in our heads, sometimes negative voices from outside, from other sources. But if we can feel that empowerment to put ourselves out there, 9 times out of 10, we might get shut down, but that 10th opportunity might be exactly what we need.
True. So obviously with the online WordCamps, things are really different now. And I'd love to hear what you think has improved or been worse regarding inclusivity within the WordPress space during this pandemic time and these different WordCamps.
One of the things that I think has been, really stellar is the opportunity for people to attend. So when everything was only in person, there was such an economic and time barrier for people to be able to attend WordCamps. If you wanted to attend 10 WordCamps in a year and you are, let's say, a freelancer, that would be next to impossible, especially if you're taking care of a family, looking at the time and the money that it would take to do that. But the opportunity to attend online means, especially on weekends, all I have to do is turn on my computer or even look on my phone, and I can participate as much or as little as I'd like to. When I go to a WordCamp in person, I'm there. Even if it's like, oh, there's no topic right now that I want to listen to. I can't just go put in a load of laundry or, put the kids down for a nap or something. Not that I have kids anymore, but you know what I mean. To do those kinds of things. Yeah, exactly. The cats for a nap. To do those kinds of things or like during the lunch hour, things like that. Now, do I miss being in person where I can go hang out and, at lunch with people? And of course I do. And I think that in the future, hybrid events would be perfect because, yes, I would love to attend all the WordCamps. And even when I get back to travel again, I'm not going to be able to attend all the WordCamps. So if there's some sort of hybrid where I can hop on, a hallway track on Zoom or be able to listen to things asynchronously offline and be able to do those kinds of things, I think that that's the perfect way to be inclusive of everybody. It makes it global. It makes it socioeconomically advantageous. It gives everybody an equal opportunity to pay attention and tune in.
It's true. Yeah, I started thinking about the WordCamp registration form too while you were talking about all the different needs that different groups would have when it comes to attending something in person. And I was curious if you want to share your opinion on, when you have the registration form, it just has the one question, the one little checkbox for, do you need special accommodations, which I think they reworded from previously, because previously it was more focused on like food needs and I believe captioning. Do you have any thoughts on that you want to share?
Yeah, I think it would be great if, we do ask people if they have, especially we ask speakers, I know for sure, if there's any accommodations that they need because of either walking with a cane or using a scooter now when I go around places. I absolutely have to be able to have access to a stage that doesn't include a lot of stairs or that doesn't require that I stand to speak for 40 minutes. So, for example, I gave a talk at WordCamp Boston 3 years ago. And they put a chair there, but the place to sit, I would have had the podium would have been taller than I was sitting in the chair that I was sitting in. So I was like, well, how is this going to work, right? So they actually moved the podium to the floor, and I was up on the dais, and it was like perfect desk height, so it worked out. But asking better questions when somebody says that they have an accommodation need, we need to be able to ask specific questions and get specific information. Give people the opportunity to say what their specific needs are. If I'm a speaker, I always say now, I need to be able to sit down and see the audience to give my talk and have a place to put my laptop because I'm going to be advancing through slides, for example. And I don't want to have 2 chairs. I don't want to have my laptop on a chair in front of me because that just looks so unprofessional. I need to still be a professional person while I'm presenting and have my disability needs met. So there's one example, for example.
Right. You would think that seeing the audience, seeing your slides, and being in the front of the room would be, you know, a given. But of course, people that don't have those needs aren't going to consider that. So it's great that you're highlighting these issues and things that we can do to make things better.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah.
actually, someone in the chat said that they had some similar mobility issues that caused them to not go to WordCamp. So at least during this time, it's been nice to extend these types of sessions to everyone.
Yes, absolutely. And I've been places before where, you know, at WordCamp US in Nashville, everything was pretty compact, and that was super nice. But lunch was almost a half a mile away by the time you walked around almost 2 city blocks. And I did it the first day, not realizing how far it would be to walk. And the second day, I knew I couldn't because I didn't have the energy, I didn't have the stamina. And so somebody went and got me lunch and brought it back, and we ate lunch together. But I missed out on opportunities. And we don't want anybody in our community to miss out on opportunities because lunch is so far away. So if I'd had a scooter at that one, it would have been no problem. But people who have those mobility issues but are still walking with assistive devices, or who have lung capacity issues, so people who have oxygen and things like that, we have to remember that there's more than wheelchairs as far as accessibility goes.
Right. Well, especially now we're having an aging population too, in some areas that's heightened, and so it's definitely something to keep in mind. And after COVID, obviously, there's going to be more people with oxygen needs. So it's something that we need to be mindful of. And yeah,
absolutely.
Well,
yeah.
Thank you so much again for your session. People can continue the conversation in Slack. Michelle is in Slack. You can find her online. The link for Slack is on the homepage of the site if you aren't already in there. And thank you again, Michelle.
Thanks for having me.